All right, welcome everyone to Youth in Action, a conversation centering young leaders' role in protecting climate. I'm Greg Gershuni. I'm the Executive Director of the Aspen Institute's Energy and Environment Program and the Co-Director of Aspen Ideas Climate. And I'd like to introduce Nikki Santos, the Executive Director of the Center for Native American Youth.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here at such an early time. You're here because, like us, you believe that young people deserve to be centered in conversations. And it is with a deep honor and privilege that I get to introduce this morning's keynote, one of my friends and mentors, the former Secretary of the Department of Interior, Sally Jewell.
Thank you, Nikki and Greg, and welcome to all of you. It's a privilege to be here at the Aspen Ideas Fest, and you may be wondering, what on earth am I doing up here on a panel on youth in action? I'm definitely not young. I'm not Indigenous, and we have a number of Indigenous representatives in the room and more coming. In fact, I'm an immigrant, and I discovered some very disturbing facts about my own family history in the settlement of North America when my great-great-grandfather was in the Royal Navy in the mid-1800s. Like so many people like me, I was privileged. I came to this country as a 3-year-old, and my father asked his new colleagues what people did around our new home, which was Seattle, Washington, USA, and I was told they camped and they hiked, and they joined this little cooperative, REI, to buy gear, which was then in the second floor next to the Mountaineers in a downtown Seattle office building, which he joined for $1. Any of you know REI in the room? Handful of you. Okay. So that's what we did. As newcomers to our new home in the Pacific Northwest, we explored the mountains and the waters, and I went to this wonderful camp for 3 years with a dozen other kids, and we got to spend 2 weeks every summer with graduate students learning about nature and the natural world around us with a wonderful teacher, Mrs. Black. So I joined the climbing club in my high school, regular public high school. It's a little different now. And I learned how to ski, and I didn't recognize my privilege, like I suspect a number of others in the room here of my age. And I didn't realize that many people didn't have an opportunity to connect with nature or the environment. And I took for granted my comfort in the natural world, as I think many people like me do. So I graduated from college as an engineer, and I went to work in the oil industry, petroleum engineer for Mobil Oil. It was my first deep look into the impact of fossil fuels on our environment and the impact on local communities, where you had an oil skim on the water that we were drinking. And that was long before climate change was even on our radar. So I left the oil patch and went into banking, partly because I yearned to be back in the nature of the Pacific Northwest. But I provided capital to help companies exploit our natural resources, something that our colonial system here, the capitalism system, has been supporting for hundreds of years. But it was also my first introduction to doing business with Indigenous people, which was something I really enjoyed. Especially enjoyed learning about the diverse cultures and the relationships with the natural world as these communities work to support economic development and harmony with the environment, but also with an understanding of how the world was moving. And so, as an active volunteer, I began to become much more aware of the challenges in our community, like inequality and unchecked development and gaps in education, and the importance of working together toward smarter decisions, including balancing the needs of humans with the natural world around us. So I left banking and went to work for that little cooperative my father had joined 41 years before, REI, and realized that our members looked a lot like me, although they were more men than women. And we took for granted the places in nature that we thought would be here forever. We noticed that our customers were homogeneous and they were aging along with the co-op. And we began doing research on how people connected to the natural world and the outdoors, and realized it's so important to listen to different voices, which is what we're going to do today. Many people were disconnected from nature. They felt they weren't welcome in the outdoors, or they were dealing with so many challenges that they had little opportunity to participate in the healing that only nature can provide. And here we know that here in Aspen. It's pretty beautiful. So we connected a program at REI called PEAK, Promoting Environmental Awareness in Kids, and we reached 500,000 young people. But we realized it was just a seed, and that seed needed more water to plant. And so we began to work with other groups on these youth conservation corps and programs that brought people into nature and increased their comfort. So when President Obama asked me to join his cabinet in 2013 as Secretary of the Interior, I had a really steep learning curve, as many people do going into these roles. My predecessor, Ken Salazar, from this state of Colorado, had worked hard on accelerating development of renewable energy on public lands while dealing with, and this is tough for him, the devastating impact of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which certainly was a wake-up call for everyone about the impact on our environment, particularly in that case, the marine environment. So the team at Interior said, what are your priorities? What do you want to do? And of course, I wanted to continue to support Secretary Salazar's efforts in renewable energy and looking at the landscapes holistically. But I wanted to work particularly on engaging young people in nature and building a deeper and more trusting relationship with Indigenous communities. So with a much larger platform, we realized we could have a big impact on young people, much bigger than what we attempted to do at REI. So we work with partners like the YMCA, and I know we've got someone from the YMCA here, as a national partner to connect with cities and young people. They serve 6 million young people a day, the largest daycare environment, and yet so many of those kids don't have an opportunity to work in green spaces. They're indoors, and they're maybe getting physically fit, but they're not connecting with nature. We created the Every Kid in a Park program, which provided a free pass for every child at 4th grade to go into public lands for free and to take their whole family and their friends. And the subsequent administration tried to kill it, and Congress codified it by a wide bipartisan vote. So we permanently have Every Kid Outdoors. So every 4th grader in the country is provided with this Free America the Beautiful pass, but also the curriculum is focused on those 4th and 5th grade kids who are, it's really in a formative age where that connection to nature, like my own in those camps that I went to, were so important. And we worked with Youth Conservation Corps crews across the country who did 3 million hours of volunteer service on public lands and supported 100,000 new paying jobs for young people in public lands to introduce them to all these careers that just were never on their radar. So for the young people here, talk to me afterwards if you want to talk about careers in nature and the outdoors. So one memorable example was celebrated by the White House, naming gentleman Anthony Sioko. He went by Chaco at that time, and he's a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. And they named him a White House Champion for Change for his work with the Ancestral Lands program at the Southwest Conservation Corps. So he took took young people struggling, all men in this case, out to the lands in the desert Southwest near the Navajo Reservation. And their lives were given purpose through their conservation work. And more on that in a minute, because I'm going to read an excerpt from Chaco's blog at the end. So along our journey, we were also deepening relationships with Indigenous communities. It's something that President Obama really cared deeply about, and he hosted the Tribal Nations Conference for all the leaders from all the tribal nations around the nation to come in every year, which was great. When I arrived, he signed an executive order called the White House Council on Native American Affairs, which is a group he asked me to chair. Our cabinet colleagues came in. They realized that each of them played a role in shaping the future of American Indians, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiians. But one group that the White House, the Obama administration, and we really wanted to reach was Native youth. And the partner we turned to for help was the Center for Native American Youth, or CNA, at the Aspen Institute. And that's who Nikki represents. It's why I'm here. And it was a brilliant group. And so we worked with some of the incredible young minds from the Obama campaign that did so much great social media. And together we created a program called Generation Indigenous, or GenI for short. And we worked with CNAY to invite Native youth from across the country to take the GenI challenge. And that was to talk about what they were going to do to make their communities stronger. And each young person that participated, and there were over 1,500 of them, were invited to Washington, D.C. to participate in a tribal youth, a Native youth summit, headlined by Michelle Obama. Who wouldn't want to go to an event headlined by Michelle Obama? Her husband participated too, which was nice of him. So it was over 1,500 young people, and that's something that CINE has continued to expand. And you're going to hear from a number of youth today that are associated with CINE, and some of them came to us through the Gen I Challenge, which is great. So I'm proud to sit on the advisory board and see these young people flourish, despite the many obstacles so many of them have had to overcome, because they provide hope and mentorship for the youth that look up to them, and it's really pretty exciting. So one of the programs that they're doing is called Brave Heart Fellows, and it's one of the things that is illustrative of what we're going to talk about today, which is a youth-led program that equips participants to advocate and mobilize across their communities to protect traditional lands, waterways, and sacred sites, to address the inequities that they face, and help them in their fight for climate justice. So CINE is at the epicenter of doing this and providing a platform for young people, especially Indigenous people, to engage. So with each passing year, and this is what comes with the benefit of the gray hair, is how does our system fit together? And how does colonialism and capitalism impact how our environment, how we treat people, how we lift people up or keep them down? And it's just been so striking to me how important it is to listen to youth voices, to address the challenges that we, my generation, and those before me have wrought on the environment, and our responsibility to work with young people on shaping the brighter future. So I know you're in for an enlightening discussion as we hear perspectives from Cheyenne and Nikki and the youth that are going to participate today. So I want to end just by reading a brief excerpt from Anthony Sioko, or Chaco's blog that he provided when he was honored by the White House. He says, "When I took up Conservation Corps work, I did not realize how much it would impact the lives of my crew members, nor the impact our work would have on the environment. One of my crews worked throughout the hot Arizona summer, installing induced meander structures to restore the healthy flow of a precious local stream. After 3 months of grueling labor, the local wash was hit by a once-in-a-100-years flood, wiping out most of the work we had done. We walked along the stream the following day in silence, not sure whether to cry, laugh, or just quit, assuming that all our labor was in vain. Just as all seemed lost, we noticed something was different. What the book said would take decades had just happened overnight. It had worked. The flood was a blessing, as if the stream had seen our efforts, called for rain, and utilized the surgically placed structures to flow healthy again. For the first time, we saw deer tracks. The stream, the ecosystem, our faith in our efforts and in ourselves blossomed back to life. Native Americans as a group rank the worst in virtually every social ill. Many crew members are high school dropouts, have endured years of child abuse, don't know one or both of their parents, have seen a sibling or friend commit suicide, have overcome substance abuse, and very few have running water or electricity in their homes, and that remains true today. While this could be a cliched sob story, it doesn't have to continue as such. Despite the overwhelming hardships, we persist as a crew. We work, learn, and thrive. Conservation pay doesn't lift individual members out of intergenerational poverty. It does something so much more valuable. It empowers them to lift themselves and to overcome any and every obstacle they set their minds to. So thanks to Chaco for those wise words. And then now I'm going to turn the mic back to our moderators from CINE and the Aspen Institute, and I really look forward to our youth discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Joel, for those remarks and for setting the tone for this conversation. Good morning, everyone. I am Nikki Devines. I lead our Future Leaders Climate Initiative with the Energy and Environment Program, which seeks to create spaces for young leaders, for the next generation of young leaders, the climate change movement, and a space where they feel empowered and uplifted to tackle the most pressing issues of climate change in their communities. In a few moments, we're going to get started, and we'll hear from 4 discussants who will help us start the conversation, sharing their experiences as youth leaders and share opportunities to center youth voices. But before we begin, I'd like to set the intention and invite each and every one of you to be a part of the conversation today. We have a commitment to center all youth voices and for this to be an intergenerational collaboration and discussion. So please feel free to raise your hand. There's mics around the room providing any comments, suggestions, or questions that you might have of not just the discussants here today, but of each other. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cheyenne.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cheyenne Brady. I say Pibawona, which is good morning in my traditional Cheyenne language. I am the Associate Director of Youth Programs at the Center for Native American Youth. Very excited about the work that we do. We provide resources and tools for Native youth to create the change that they want to see in the world. They are young leaders. They're inheriting this planet. They know what they need, and they know what future generations need. And so I'm honored to be with you today to be doing the work alongside each of you. And with that, I'll go ahead and hop into the discussion. Again, invite all of you to take part and build community together. And so hopping on in, I would like to pose a question: how can we better utilize community knowledge and community leadership when making change? And I want to kick it to the wonderful Soma to kick us off. Feel free to introduce yourself, share your location, and then again answer, how can we better utilize community knowledge and community leadership when making change?
Is this thing on? Okay. Goatsi hopa tuhina mentsiatimai shuimihanu. Hi, my name is Soma. I'm from the pueblos of Laguna and Jemez in so-called New Mexico, and currently reside on the East Coast in Muncie, Lenape lands in New York. So, and I work with an organization that's based in Albuquerque. We do a lot of climate justice work, mostly around the Southwest. So I think, the the most direct answer to this question is we just need to listen. We need to listen to Indigenous people. Indigenous people have been stewarding these lands for generations. I think being from the Southwest, being Pueblo, I feel really lucky that I am from our original lands. A lot of Indigenous people have been displaced from their original lands, and yet they still have relationship with it and have been stewarding it for generations. So I think that, like you said, we need to value everyone's perspective. It's not just up to one generation, but we, children, teens, all these young folks here, everyone's perspective is valuable. And also, in the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights, I think, they talk about free, prior, and informed consent. So I think that when folks are proposing projects, right, that are happening on or near Indigenous lands, often they're not given free, prior, and informed consent, which means they're not given the information in a way that's accessible to them. Like it'll be given to them in a notice with all this fancy language, but so often the language is not accessible in a way that we can understand it and digest it as a community. So I really think that that is the pinnacle of what needs to become the norm. We need to be having discussions with communities, talking with communities, especially when it comes to things on a federal level. For example, in the Greater Chaco region, they'll put protections in place, but then there's no communication between the local BLM offices and the offices in DC. So communication just all around, I think, needs to be improved. And yeah, we just need to, also Indigenous people protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. We really know what we're doing. We have connections and deep relationships with the natural world. So we need more platforms to share that knowledge.
Great.
So building on that, Secretary Jewell mentioned how she's worked in encouraging youth to serve and work in public lands. And so for Uma, I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts on how education systems can better support students in exploring career paths related to combating climate change and building effective career paths into land, climate, sustainability, and sustainability-driven opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to first say, thank you, Nikki, and Cheyenne for having us here today. I think whenever I think about like youth entrepreneurship, I really think about a quote by Marian Wright Edelman, who was a civil rights and youth rights activist, where she said, "You can't be what you can't see." And I think that that's really important to recognize that, first of all, not all young people pursue a traditional four-year college path. And so that's why the work that we do at 18 by Vote, we look at how we can galvanize civic engagement and really activate civic power among rising voters, young people 15 to 19 years old. We want to make sure that we capture this extremely important demographic upstream so that way they have the tools that they need even if they don't go to college. A lot of times the spaces for civic action are college campuses, and that really needs to change. We need to have similar opportunities in trade schools, in community colleges, and other diverse, non-traditional post-secondary pathways. This way you have a real network, like someone just said, about having the ability to know who to reach out to and how to access information about civic activism and be able to have these on-ramps to get involved. I also think it's really important to mention that youth entrepreneurship tends to be a little based into the nonprofit social impact kind of area, and it needs to be kind of pulled out of that. We need to also encourage young people to pursue social good for-profit ventures. We have to create space for youth entrepreneurship that can tap into, I believe it's about 65 trillion with a T, dollars of capital market share that it goes into companies that more often than not, do not help support our missions. And we need to train them to be able to be comfortable in both the nonprofit space, but also in the for-profit space. So when they say, I want to make a change, they can look at it and say, I want to do it in a nonprofit way or in a for-profit way, and I'm comfortable and equipped with the tools that I need to lead in both.
Thank you. Again, I encourage everyone, if anything that some of the lead discussants are sharing kind of sparks your interest and you want to make a comment, we welcome participation from everyone.
Microphone here.
My name is David Munoz. I am part of the Basil Scholar Program. I'm 17 and I live in McAllen, Texas. Within my community, especially like I see in America, more specifically, I see a culture, a deep-rooted culture from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a pop culture that cultivates this mindset of profit over everything. It cultivates that an individualistic approach to everything. It's always about me, and not about we. And so when I see these companies going around and I see this rise in for-profits and this rise of so many ventures that might affect the environment, such as the one proposed in Alaska, I forgot, the Willow Project.
Yeah.
I see this and I just think to myself, what are we teaching the young people? Mm-hmm. And I went to this event for college. It's about sustainability and teaching young people. And I asked a question on this. I asked a question on how can we change this culture? How can we change this approach to about individualistic approach, something that cares about profits over everything? And I got an answer of there's different programs and there's different things, right? But I believe that the best way to change this approach and to change this mentality that's deep-rooted in American culture, I believe it's through secondary and higher education, such as high school, middle school. And we don't teach people this. We teach them basic macroeconomics. We teach them, profits are incentivized over everything else. It's just about don't care about the environment. And while I think that it's very important to teach children about about the nature and how it affects us, I think it's also as important to teach students or teach people that there's also a place in America for leadership. There's also a place in America for values rather than what we currently place in here.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary Joel.
Thanks. That was a wonderful summary of a huge problem. And I just want to say that as I look at how the system fits together, the system of capitalism, how we train people, one thing that is incredibly important is youth voices in being advocates. So while government plans and programs may take a while to catch up, businesses hate being the focal point of activism that's holding them accountable for their bad behavior. And I can't tell you how reputational risk is a giant lever. So think about Greta Thunberg and her activism around climate from her early teen years. It's not for everybody. Everybody's not an advocate and an activist, but that is an important role that you can play in how the system fits together. I will say, having been involved in several academic institutions and speaking specifically on sustainability and climate change in the environment, it is the number one thing that I hear from business students, from students in engineering, from students in the College of the Environment. And so I do think it's changing, but I will say for those of you that are outspoken and want to speak up, your voices do matter. And the reputational risk and how you spend your money and how you encourage people to spend their money or spend their resources does matter. And so please don't underestimate the power of your voice. It's actually really, really important.
Yes, thank you, Secretary Joel. And that's a really good segue. Oh, one more. Thank you. That's okay.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Navarre. I lead a kindergarten through 8th grade school in Chicago, Illinois, on the city's west side. And this is a question for all of the young people out there. So at my school, we start taking students out into the natural world starting in 2nd grade, but that is not the norm in public education, especially for kids who live in the city or in urban environments. My question for the young people here is, what would you like to see changing in public education at the very young ages for our kids to grow up to be the activists that we want them to be, to grow up with a deep understanding of the natural world? And so I just want to, I throw that back to the young people, and I'll take notes for all the old leaders like me.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you for your questioning, because I do think it's very, very important to address, especially given the direction that the world is going in today. But also, you're not old. Like, you look fantastic, for the record. Good morning. You look fantastic, and I'd also like to say good morning to everybody in here. And all of you look fantastic today. You guys are glowing. But I will say, first of all, that's an incredible first step, because I'm telling you, even like just being outside is such a powerful thing to actually understand what's happening in the world. And the fact is, you said Chicago, is that correct? Chicago is very, very urbanized. There's not as much space in itself, given the infrastructure there, to actually explore and be in nature, but at least giving students the resources, being like, here is a space for you to actually connect with a different place that they're probably not very used to. That is an incredible first step. But also, my school, we have a club called the Green Guild, where we recently passed a bill. Students from our school passed a bill in Michigan to actually help climate education and incorporate it into some of our lesson plans. And on that note, our school also started this like brand new program where we're working on composting and like just make it as known as possible to the students. Like, as dumb as this sounds and as basic as it sounds, it's the start of change. So honestly, set up compost bins, recycling, and trash. And kids do struggle at times to fully grasp the concept, because I still don't know what to recycle and not to sometimes. But even like knowing the most basics of it, that would be the start of trying to become a more eco-friendly place, and at least starting to integrate that more than if we can do it not just academically, but in that extracurricular context of learning how to do it within a school setting, then it extends to different places and people take it home, and then that becomes the ripple for change.
Do one more.
If I could add on to that. Oh, okay. My name is Ayushi. I'm also a Bezos scholar. I'm 16. I'm from Los Angeles, California, so not a lot of nature out there. And one thing that I'm also going to pass this off to Kim because she's from Oregon is make trips out into nature free and accessible. Because something about it is like, I remember we got like this one big trip in 5th grade out to the Palisades where we got to spend time in the mountains. And it was one of the memories I hold fondest as a kid because spending time in nature is so important. It was expensive. And there are kids that can't afford that. And so we're essentially creating a class gap in nature and nature accessibility. And then also going closer back to your question about, how to get youth to be activists, I really appreciate forums like this, right? Where we're like, yes, let's listen to youth voices. But I would argue that we need to do more than that. It's not about just sitting here and listening to us complain or discuss things and then you're like, I did it. You also have to go further than that, actually pursue real action based off of that. But now I'm gonna pass it off to Kim, who's gonna tell you about outdoor school.
Wait, quick clap for Ayushi. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm also a Bezos scholar, and like Ayushi said, I am from Oregon. I'm 17, and something that's really unique about Oregon is an amazing state. It's a sanctuary state, but also it prioritizes the environment. So students all over Oregon, 6th grade students, take a week in nature where they learn about plants, animals, water, and soil. And so they have either staff or students in my school district, the Multnomah Education School District. We have student volunteers. I've been lucky enough to go for 2 weeks in the last 2 years. But we are learning about nature and teaching it to 6th grade students and forming a bond and providing an alternative to traditional education. And then students at the beginning of the week, they don't want to be there. They want their phones, they want technology, but by the end of the week, they don't want to leave. They are so excited to learn and they just want to keep looking at bugs and they keep on going on nature hikes. I am on the plants field study, so I've learned so much about random things in nature. So every time I come back, I take my parents on a million walks and I teach them all about nature. And also something that Oregon does really, really well is in all schools, in all public spaces, recycling is a really big thing. We have bottle drop, which is, I don't know how many other states have that, but essentially your canned bottles, you can take them to a center to be recycled and then you get money back. And it's a really good way to introduce the idea that the environment is important and there's steps that all of us can take to make it a good place. But providing that opportunity for 6th grade students to spend a week in nature and just you sing campfire songs all the time. I've been teaching all the other scholars campfire songs is a great bonding experience in a way to teach them that nature is beautiful and you belong in nature.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I invite everybody to build community after. I'm going to go ahead and hop into another question. Again, I know everybody wants to make a comment. I definitely invite everybody to continue to build community as soon as we're done here. We're running on time, but I really want to kick it to Auburn really quickly. A nice segue. We're seeing a surge in a number of corporate resources dedicated to environment, social, and corporate governance initiatives, and corporate governance initiatives, and there's concern about greenwashing. How do we teach young people how to use existing structures to improve them and turn ESG into real actions?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to respond to that and to be in community and in conversation with these amazing, passionate youth leaders, both on the panel but also in the audience. I think we were just kind of chatting about that and starting on that, both with Sally and this gentleman here, talking about kind of the private company and the private sector and their investments in this me mentality. And so when we're talking about environmental social governance commitments from these private entities and these investors, we need to talk about, and we're trying to teach youth how to utilize those structures. I want to just kind of add to that and not necessarily repeat too much, but to start local. We're talking a lot about starting in school, starting from K through 12, and that's engaging and realizing that a lot of these greenwashing commitments and the impacts of that are seen in your community. So when you have these companies coming and saying that they're doing XYZ and they're going to provide XYZ commitments and benefits to the environment, you can see that in your own backyard if they're committing to that, and then utilizing your own research, and also I know youth funding your own money isn't always available, but it's once the youth being 18, 20 to 29 or whatever, utilizing your own pocketbook as a voice in that and ensuring that you're not doing the research to know which one of these private organizations, these commitments are actually greenwashing, and then deciding, I'm not putting my money there, I'm not working there, I'm not encouraging this space, and I'm not engaging with them in their commitments in the local level. So I think we teach youth by modeling that as well for the older generation. So the older generation who have the more financial investments and opportunities, realizing and doing the research yourselves and realizing that you need to take that type of action and make those same commitments to not supporting, not investing, not using your own money and funding for companies that are going to greenwash and be a detriment to our climate and economy for the youth long term, because the youth are the ones, we are the ones who are going to feel the impact long term, long after the commitments go dry and long after the impacts of climate change are felt. So that's just what I wanted to add to the conversation, because I feel like we already had some really great thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that analysis and starting the solution on the domestic level. But my question is, how do we start to create that awareness and impact on the international level? Specifically with countries like China right now, well, they're leading the green revolution, whether that be with building solar panels, creating the batteries for greener cars, but they're also leading the world in CO2 emissions. And that raises the greater questions of where are they getting the resources and the rare earth minerals needed to create those technologies, and are they sourcing them ethically? That creates is a huge thing I fear, especially when we are making that transition into a greener world. But how do we start that conversation to create a genuine impact on when countries are the ones doing the greenwashing?
Behind you.
So my name is Monica Medina, and I am currently the CEO and president of the Wildlife Conservation Society, based in New York. We're the Central Park Bronx zoos were. So we do a lot of environmental education, but it was great to hear how much more you need. I will work on that. We also work in 50 countries around the world with on-the-ground conservation programs, conserving nature. And I have one comment for you, because I am only a month into this job. Before that, I was at the U.S. State Department. I was our global lead for biodiversity and natural resources, water resources. We worked with Indigenous communities around the country to try and bring them into the conversation, truly, and bring them to our meetings. I wanted to address the plastic issue that you raised. There is a global agreement on plastic pollution currently being negotiated. I think there are not enough youth voices involved in that. There are lots of Indigenous voices who have come to the meetings so far. We've had great representation at those, but we haven't had as many youth voices. And the U.S. government is setting up a platform for participation in those negotiations, and I would encourage you all to look into that. I think the best place to do it is to go to the State Department website. On your point about China, there are lots of people trying to put pressure on China. It's interesting, a lot of you have talked about nature and biodiversity as much even as climate. The one thing you haven't maybe latched onto, and I haven't heard many youth leaders talk about, is the global effort at conserving 30% of the planet by 2030. That is a huge undertaking. It's as big as the climate undertaking, and we need more youth voices speaking up for 30 by 30. I think you are all there because that's what you are really latching onto, I think, most in the climate movement. It's not, necessarily big energy, projects. It's about nature and biodiversity, and we need your voices in that struggle as well. It's going to take a lot of work to get 30% of the planet set aside for nature by 2030. So please keep this up. Our organization will continue to try and increase our education, but I really have very much appreciated being here to listen to your voices and hear what matters to you. So thanks.
Thank you. That's actually a really nice segue to Stefano and thinking about voice. We've heard a lot of conversation around youth voice. And so Stefano, I'd love for you to talk about the work that you're doing and how we can create opportunities for youth to control their own narrative when it comes to climate and other areas as it intersects with climate change.
For sure. Thank you so much for inviting me, Nikki and Cheyenne, and it's such a pleasure to be here speaking in front of you all. So I'm a National Geographic Young Explorer, and I started a nonprofit called El Parque Collective, which works to build equitable resources for Latinx youth and communities to have the opportunities to better understand and preserve their histories on their own terms. So we build education programs for this youth in order to engage with their histories, create artwork, and to participate in public discourse. But also we work with the local community to build archives. To answer your question more directly, I feel that throughout this experience, I have seen how storytelling has been a direct pathway for youth leaders to be able to connect and also to heal, which is such a huge process that we need in order to find the solutions that we are looking for. It starts at the local level, right? Excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought. This is all to say that when the conversations that we would have in our education program, in the ways that we have been represented in the past, we have seen how stories have been used to either erase our histories or have been used as a way to or at least have failed to show the cultural sensitivity, the empathy really necessary to represent our stories. As a family of immigrants and as a first-generation American, I have seen how my story has been flattened and the stories of my family have been flattened to stories of tragedy, of drug wars, and there's so much more to the story. So when we give the communities and the youth the opportunity for them to tell their own stories and teach them that they have agency and that their stories matter, they build the confidence in order to be at this space, to talk to people and to have these cross-generational dialogues. I think that if we don't have that foundation, we don't have that community support that we develop by sharing our personal stories with each other and finding that empathy, we're not going to be able to perform in these spaces. And or not perform, but to speak honestly in these spaces. And when we have our community in the back of our mind, we're always going to be stronger. So yeah, that's...
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. I want to start closing us out a little bit. This construct of time, I apologize that we didn't all get to speak. We could be here for a couple more hours, which would be amazing. But I want to kick it to Charity to start closing us out. And I just want to ask you, yourself and other young people, what do you really need from all sectors, including philanthropy, government, and on-the-ground leadership to really create the lasting change that you guys want to see?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to add, also to Stefano's point, I really appreciate all the Bezos scholars being here. You guys are all brilliant. But young people have the ability to reimagine what our world would look like if all of our communities had all the resources we need to thrive. And we also have the ability to really dream about what our communities would look like if we reached liberation. And I'm Yupik. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Yupik and Pacific Islander and Samoan. Yupik is like Alaska Native culture for folks who don't know. And I'm a product of one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, and I can't emphasize enough how impactful local community changes, testifying at your school board meetings. One testimony can lead to a policy change, which is what me, my friend Nishay, our own mothers were deeply involved in this too, and we passed policy that allowed students of color to wear regalia when crossing the stage, and so I was able to do this my senior year. So when we think about climate justice, it's also rooted in how do we make education equitable for students of color, for Black students, for Native students, for Pacific Islander students. And for me, that's of priority because I come from a place where there's so much diversity. There's a huge Pacific Islander community back home in Alaska, but there's also a huge, beautiful Alaska Native community back at home too. And when I think about what do youth need, going back to what Soma was saying, they need to listen to us. I think of my friends like Aisha, Sophia, and we also need money too for the organizations that we run, like donate to Stefano's nonprofit. We need money, we need people to listen to. And then I also think about what's happening at the United Nations. Pacific Islander youth are leading the cause to hold countries that are polluting the most. And I'm talking about countries in the global north, countries like the United States. How do we hold this country accountable for the onset of settler colonialism, not only within, in Alaska and Hawaii, the rest of the lower 48 states, but American territories, Guam, the Marshall Islands, American Samoa. There's representatives from each of those territories on the Hill in DC, but they don't have any voting power, even though those policies directly impact our community. So I don't know if that answered the question, but to give us money, listen to us, and pay for our travel and pay for our time. That's what I'd say.
So I think that's all the time that we have for today, but you all have been amazing. We want to just say thank you so much for this conversation. I'm going to invite Nikki back up to do some closing remarks and reflections for us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So I would like to, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. As Sally had mentioned in her opening remarks, we have a collective responsibility to listen to young people, and that's what we did our best to do today. Soma encouraged us to give free, prior, and informed consent to Indigenous people as they are the first stewards of this land. Uma called us to action to give youth the tools that they need to thrive in not just nonprofit, but for-profit ventures. And we were reminded that there is a space for not me, but we, and values in this country. And to our young people, we encourage you to speak up and are reminded that your voices matter. And as Sally had said so fiercely, do not underestimate the power of your voice. And to our adult allies and our adult leaders, I hope that you walk alongside with us to prioritize youth. And as Aishi had called us in as a powerful call to action, to pursue real action after we leave these doors here. And as we leave, I hope that we all can work together to reimagine what this world will look like as we collectively pursue liberation. Thank you so much for your time today.